la doctora Ingrid Parent. Ingrid, gracias por acompañarnos en esta presentación y por la conferencia que vas a dictar. Tengo que señalar que Ingrid Parent, como ustedes saben, es presidenta de IFLA y ella es bibliotecaria por la Universidad de British Columbia. Ella fue ganadora del premio de distinción al servicio de investigación en bibliotecología y ha sido reconocida a nivel nacional e internacional por sus sobresalientes aportaciones a las bibliotecas y en general al campo disciplinario bibliotecológico. Ha conducido actividades para desarrollar estándares y políticas de manejo de material digital y tiene como prioridad el desarrollo de un plan digital en la Universidad de British Columbia. Se ha involucrado y ha sido también reconocido su trabajo por varias asociaciones y organizaciones internacionales con las cuales ha colaborado. Menciono a la UNESCO, a la Asociación Internacional de Editores, a la Red Internacional de ISSN, a la Organización Internacional de la Propiedad Intelectual, a la Asociación de Bibliotecas de Investigación. Es, por supuesto, socia activa de IFLA, en donde ha estado trabajando con los órganos de gobierno por 14 años. Y en IFLA ha promovido fuertemente el acceso equitativo a la información y la apertura a la diversidad de voces en el mundo de la información. Ha ocupado diferentes posiciones de liderazgo y destacadas posiciones en la Universidad de British Columbia y ha alcanzado el rol de asistente adjunto del ministro. En 2011 fue distinguida como doctora honoris causa por la Universidad de Ottawa, Canadá. Gracias, Ingrid, por estar aquí con nosotros. Y menciono también a Luis ZACHARILLA. Él es cofundador del movimiento Global Intelligent Community, y Luis ZACHARILLA es conocido y es reconocido por su gran participación y aportación a este movimiento, conocido de ese modo como Global Intelligent Community Movement, ¿cierto? Ok. Él es cofundador de esta comunidad. Y tendríamos que señalar que es un equipo de orden global internacional que hace un estudio particular sobre las comunidades con energía para el nuevo siglo. A través de su sede en Nueva York, este movimiento y en particular el trabajo de él está dedicado a ayudar a las comunidades sobre el liderazgo y la comprensión de mejores prácticas para liderar el trabajo de las comunidades con energía, y ya han establecido un conjunto de criterios para desarrollar este trabajo. ZACHARILLA es coautor de 3 libros y, como decíamos, es un destacado miembro de esta organización, reconocido ampliamente por su trabajo. A ambos agradezco su participación y vamos a dar inicio con la conferencia de Ingrid Parent sobre el reporte de tendencias de IFLA. Adelante, Ingrid.
Muchas gracias, Jaime. Lou ZACHARILLA and I are going to be working as a team for this presentation. I will begin with a few words about IFLA and how we came to develop the IFLA trend report. And Lou will talk about more detail of that trend report and also of a broader issue in communities and how libraries serve communities. And we hope that we will have questions after. If you would like to pose your questions, we'd be happy to answer them. So as I said at the opening, for the next few days we're going to explore the impact of digital developments and the expanding technological, social, and economic environment in which libraries operate and serve their communities. But I think, our discussions will go beyond libraries, and we'll be talking about related fields such as cultural industries, such as community development, research and education, and, of course, the legal environment for digital access around the world. And I think if there's one lesson to be learned from the digital environment, it's that information is truly global, and we are all connected in the creation, the preservation, and the dissemination of knowledge. You may know that each IFLA president has a theme for the 2 years in which we serve and which guides the activities of the Federation. And the theme that I chose almost 2 years ago is Libraries, a Force for Change. And I believe that perhaps as never before have libraries been in such a unique position to represent the interests of their citizens by being centers of inclusion, of transformation, and centers of innovation and convergence for all information institutions. And IFLA itself is in a unique position to advocate for libraries, librarians, institutions, and associations that they represent on a whole host of current issues and challenges, such as copyright and such as freedom of expression. We also help librarians to become a force for change by supporting our individual and association members through a variety of training and support programs. And I'd like to mention the Building Strong Libraries Associations program, which we have developed a few years ago to help associations in various countries around the world to develop a more strategic and coordinated approach to their own activities within each country. Library associations are very important because they are the advocates for equitable access to information, and they're the ones that help libraries in their own communities to improve their services for all our users. And we also have our International Librarian Leadership Program, which is designed to increase the number of leaders who can effectively represent the wider library sector on the international scene and to develop leaders within IFLA. And I'm really pleased to say that we have representatives from the Latin American and Caribbean region participating in both of these programs. From my perspective, I have little doubt, I'm very optimistic that the Library of the Digital Future will remain a central hub of the community, offering services that are relevant to its users, and that we continue to move with the times in terms of access to reading materials, to technologies, and to the spaces that we offer our users. And not only will these services be available within our own physical walls, but they will also be available remotely via the internet, providing access to information resources and librarian expertise all over the world. I would like to also mention one special initiative that IFLA has undertaken in keeping with its global presence. IFLA is a multilingual and multicultural federation with member representation from all over the world. And although many of our policies, our guidelines, and our documents are increasingly available in IFLA's 7 official languages, I am very pleased to tell you that 2 weeks ago, we launched a second language version of our website, of the IFLA website. And that language is Spanish. So, so we will have more Spanish content there, and we will continue to translate IFLA website into other official languages over the next months and years. But you know, multilingualism, translation, is a very time-consuming, labor-intensive activity. And it really is thanks to the volunteers who do all the work of translation for IFLA, for the IFLA staff who have made this happen. So I'm very pleased that this initiative is going to continue for the Federation for the years to come. So now I can get now to the trend report, which is what we will be talking about for the next several minutes. A major preoccupation of libraries is to better understand the environment in which we operate, especially in the changing environment. And I don't refer only to the technology, to the technological environment, but also to the economic and the social and the legal issues that surround us and how they are developing. So it's very important that we be aware of and we understand those factors in developing our own library services and policies. And so IFLA has commissioned the development of something we call the Trend Report. And this report is going to provide options and scenarios for libraries, both locally and internationally, to position themselves within this changing environment that we are in. During our annual Congress in Helsinki last August, we held intensive discussions with librarians and information experts about what is the content, what should that be for such a trend report, what are some of the issues. And we also called on experts from around the world to contribute papers and to contribute their ideas on future trends. What is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years? And we are delighted by the number and the quality of the information that we have gathered so far. And for the past 2 days here at UNAM, we held what we called our Big Tent meeting, where we invited 10 experts from around the world to discuss the issues facing libraries over the next years to come. And these 10 experts were not librarians, but they were experts in different disciplines and different fields of knowledge. And that brought sort of a different perspective to us in terms of understanding what the environment will be like. And I must say, for us, many governing board members here, many staff here who attended that meeting yesterday and Monday, it was an incredible eye-opener to listen to these knowledgeable experts exchange their wisdom and their expertise. And it covered so many topics. I learned so much about history, about politics, about economics, about demographics, and social trends. I mean, all these things that will affect libraries over the next while, we have to better understand what they are and how they will impact us. So that information and future information, we will be continuing this process of gathering opinions and perspectives from many experts around the world, will contribute to this trend report. And we're going to launch it at the IFLA Congress in Singapore in August. And I hope many of you will be attending that conference in August. And I know that this report will make a big difference to how libraries develop their services and their future. I was in Australia 3 weeks ago, and the Australian Library Association are doing strategic planning. And so they are waiting for this report to help them to develop their plans and their operations for the next while. So I don't think there's been a report that has been so anticipated and that will be so useful for our members than this trend report. And I do look forward to seeing it and to using it and to sharing it with all of you. So one of the 10 experts who was at the meeting yesterday is Mr. Lou Zacharilla here. He will be sharing his insights with us on some of these factors around libraries and how we function and how we will develop in the future. And as Jaime said, he will also talk about the intelligent community. And it's so nice to hear, I hope, that libraries form an essential part of those intelligent communities. So if I may just conclude with that, and I will turn it over to Lou. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Buenos dias. And gracias, Ingrid, for those remarks. And also, I'd like to just thank IFLA for the honor of inviting me here to be a part of that experts roundtable. I never think of myself as an expert, but when I talk and people listen, I guess well, as my mother said, just keep faking it. But it was a very productive event, and I actually learned a lot more than probably I gave out in terms of information. But I do want to thank IFLA for the work that they do to really transform communities and cities and lives around the world through the work of their members. It is a remarkable task. I also just wanted to take a moment to thank UNAM and my friend Dr. Jaime, Dr. Felipe, and of course Dr. Morales Campos for having me here from New York. In New York, Mexican hospitality is legendary, but until you actually experience it, it is a completely different feeling. And I've had the privilege of the last 2.5 days to feel it and to be a part of it, and it exceeded the legend in New York, so thank you very much for what you've done for me here to make me comfortable. What I want to talk about today is, as Ingrid said, is some of the things that have been talked about the last 2.5 days, and I want to put it within the context of what I do for a living, which is to try to make cities and communities better for individuals around the world. And I will tell you a little bit about how that movement, that organization works, and what cities are doing, and the role of libraries in that movement. I've titled the talk today, New Voices for Old Truths. And the reason for that is that I don't absolutely believe that there is anything new to be discovered in the world. I think the truth is always the truth, as my grandmother used to say. It just sometimes needs to be reinterpreted with new music, a new song for a new people and a new generation in the same culture. And that's what I wanted to concentrate on today and to tell you a little bit about how that applies to the work that some of you are doing. So I'm going to be talking about that, the emergence of the intelligent community movement. By the way, intelligence and intelligent community are two different things. I don't work for the CIA. Far from it. Siente. See, technology does work. It's a very simple story to begin of why intelligent communities have evolved around the world. This is actually a picture, a real picture, taken from a satellite, and it could have been taken last night, of the Korean Peninsula in the middle of the night. Now, it's interesting to look at that picture and to create an analogy for what is happening in cities and communities over the last 30 years. If you fly over there on a satellite and take this picture, as a geosynchronous satellite did, you will notice South Korea. And what do you notice about it? It is lit. There is light. There is life. If you look at the great city of Seoul, the great city of Suwon and Busan, they are active. They are vibrant. They are pulsating with light and life. These are people who have embraced their culture, embraced technology, embraced education and knowledge, and are moving toward the light. 30 meters north of the 38th parallel, what do you see?
Dark.
You see darkness, exactly. And thank you for the lighting here, because it just went to dark and light again. These are people who are going toward the darkness. They have made decisions, they have made choices which are so starkly contrasted in the middle of the night that it is apparent to us all. And as I like to say, that little piece of light that you see in North Korea is probably a librarian who wandered there by mistake. Siente, next. There are consequences. This is obviously something that has played out in a nation, but this is what's been going on in communities for the last 30 and 35 years, in the post-industrial era. Communities are actually moving either toward the light or they are moving toward darkness. And this is a consequence of the information age, of some of the changes that have either been embraced or not in these communities. There are consequences. And what we have seen, what we have observed as a consequence of the darkness are vanishing hometowns, cultures that have vanished. within a 2-week period, we will lose 14 more languages in our human community. But worse, even worse than that, young people are leaving the places of their birth, the places of their ancestry, the places where many of them want to stay, and are moving into cities because there's nothing there for them at home. We think that's the greatest human tragedy of the 20th century. And at the Intelligent Community Movement, we hope the 21st century will be better, and we think we can play a role, along with librarians. There's also a brain drain. That is the worst consequence. The raw material, as Dr. Campos talked about, of the human mind is being extracted from these places, and someone else is getting the gain, getting the benefit. And that very much disrupts a culture. It bankrupts a culture. And those that survive, those that stay, are very shaken. They are looking for direction. They want to make their homes more economically and socially viable. They want to recover the old truths and give them new voice. So we see dysfunctional communities, in short. Next slide, please, Siente. There's something happening, though, within this, as you would expect with the human community. There's aspiration and dysfunction. I can't think of a better place to identify that than a place that I was at in November 2011, and that is Cairo, Egypt. I happened to be there on the day that Tahrir Square exploded. I actually was going there to give a speech. And what I saw was quite interesting. I saw several things, but I saw both aspiration and dysfunction. This is a picture of Tahrir Square on the night of the riot. Now, it's interesting to see what is written up on that wall. It doesn't say death to Mubarak, although many people wished it. It doesn't say, Yankee go home, or it doesn't say we love the New York Yankees. It says we want community. We want a new community. And they're identifying what that community is. And population-wise, Facebook is the 4th largest community on earth. And there's a reason for that. It gave them aspiration. It gave that community hope, and those people in that square hope. Now, this is part, I think, also of a larger context that we've been talking about over the last couple of days, and of all people, Henry Kissinger identified it. You can see a quote there, and he said, in Europe, where the idea of the nation-state formed, the state is losing its significance. Now, I'm not saying that national governments are going to fall and collapse, although we have seen a lot of that, haven't we, in the last 30 years. But what I'm saying is that they aren't working. Like communities, they aren't working. And so human beings, being what we are, we will do what we have always done brilliantly. We will fall back on our own. We will return to the tribe. We will protect ourselves. And those of us who are enlightened, who are part of the global economy in the world, will push forward from the basis of our own cultures, our own beliefs, because those are the things we can rely on. Home. And that's where home and library become very, very important for us. Siente. Yeah, the world turned upside down. What was interesting, as I said, in Egypt was that in addition to a revolution that I experienced and had to be evacuated from, the next day I drove halfway to Alexandria onto the desert, and I saw a mirage, a place called Smart Village Cairo. Some of you may know about this place. It is a miracle in the desert. 30,000 information workers, young people from Cairo, Coptic Christians and Muslims and people who may not believe in anything at all except in the future of Egypt, are working out there, and they've located Microsoft and Oracle and all the great technology companies, and they've moved their Federal Reserve Bank out there. And they believe that they are the Cairo of the light. They are going to be the beacon that moves that community toward the light. Interestingly enough, there's a library out there and a museum, and it is central to the information flow and the discussion about the future of Cairo. So while all the darkness was being experienced, the light was starting to emerge. And this is a trend we see around the world. So that's kind of the story of our thinking of why we do what we do. And if you look at the next slide, the way to begin to understand the intelligent community movement, as the media and the press call it now, is to kind of go backwards in a way. I like the past, I like history because I think it's very important for us to learn from. And I was reading something that actually Winston Churchill, the great British Prime Minister during World War II, said in the middle of World War II, this quote was 1943, this was when it looked like the Allies and the European armies of the West were going to lose. And yet he said at that time that the empires of the future will be empires of the mind. Right? Human intelligence, the human software was in his mind at that point. And I think that's an old voice that was relaying a very specific truth about the human community. Siente. Let me bring it forward now and talk a little bit about some of the discussions that we've been having, and also why we think that our work at the Intelligent Community Forum is going to be useful to every community that wants to advance in the way that Dr. Campos described it, with regard to access to information and using information as a tool for economic output. We live in a very unique moment in human history, a singularly unique moment. For the first time in human history, so far as we can tell, and we've asked a lot of experts, I've asked university professors, I've asked anthropologists, I've asked presidents of countries, I've asked CEOs of technology corporations, I've asked the ultimate authority, my mother, and they all say the same thing, that we are in a unique circumstance because there are two conditions that currently exist that have never existed before. The first is that people can live anywhere they like. The second condition that goes along with it is that they can participate in a global economy. Those two conditions have never existed in parallel before. Now that's very significant. However, what is required for those two conditions to meet is a bridge. I like to call it the railroad because I like railroads. That railroad, that connecting point, is the technology of broadband, telecommunications. So in order for someone to live in a remote part of Mexico and yet prosper and move toward the middle class, they need to be connected to that global economy. Now, if you accept that as the proposition, which we have, and begin to study it, some very, very positive dynamics occur. Siente. And we're beginning to see that, and we're beginning to see some early stage impacts, and that is why I, with my own money, agreed to organize this Intelligent Community Forum. We've seen the elimination of the middle of nowhere, okay? You know, when you ask somebody, some kid who's in the city, where did you come from, where'd you live? Oh, you never heard of it. It's in Chiapas somewhere, it's in upstate New York. It's the middle of nowhere. No more middle of nowhere. The middle of nowhere is somewhere now. So we've begun to see a recovery of place. People are beginning to stay home, beginning to create businesses, beginning to use their indigenous cultures to create social capital. So that's one early stage impact of this phenomenon in communities. The second one is research and knowledge are being redefined. And again, we've talked about that for the last 2 days, how it's in many ways being taken out of the domain of professionals and being reinterpreted. So the way we study, the way we define knowledge are being transformed. Just one example of the $10 trillion U.S. in consumer spending last year, half of it, $5 trillion, was, quote, researched on the web before the purchase. Now, it didn't need any sophisticated research. All it needed was access. Okay, so that's something else that we're seeing as an early stage impact. Things that we call MOOCs, massive online courses, distance learning, and pajama capitalism, as I call it, are also phenomena that are beginning to emerge and to begin to revive communities and cities. You've probably never heard the phrase pajama capitalism, right? Has anyone ever heard it? Maybe people have seen my speeches or read my books. Yeah, I see a few hands up. Pajama capitalism is very simple. It's a phrase that we invented. It's someone who basically works at home in their pajamas and is plugged into the economy, global economy, and does very well financially. For example, I have a friend in California. He trades commodities from his home in Santa Barbara, and he's in his pajamas. How do I know he's in his pajamas? Unfortunately, we have Skype. I see him doing it. So, again, that is an early stage impact. The next two things I think are very important, and I'll put the first one up. We're seeing the emergence of culture and quality of life becoming economic raw material. Okay? I'll repeat that. The emergence of culture and quality of life is now economic raw material. People are choosing to look at their cultures or rediscover their cultures and go in like a miner, like a nickel or a coal miner, and say, what is in this culture that we can pull out, that we can make economically viable, that will save this city or this community? There's also quality of life. I speak in communities now that are saying to people who live in the big cities, this is a great place to live. We have clean air, we have clean water, we have nice people. So we don't have too many of those in New York. Right? And they say we have good food, fresh food. Come here, because you can be part of a global economy and have a good quality of life. And that has economic and social consequence. So we're starting to see that as an early stage impact. The thing that makes me the most excited, though, and should make, I think, everyone excited, or at least think about becoming excited, is cities and communities are seizing their destiny. Remember when I said to you that the nation state, according to Dr. Kissinger and other experts, is no longer functioning? It's kind of dysfunctional. Our national governments aren't serving us the way we want them to. Well, what's happening is that mayors and city council members, and along with their librarians, along with their technology companies, along with their activist citizens, are saying, we're going to seize our own destiny. We're going to take it back. You know, we're Riverside, California. We have terrible gang problems. But we were once the richest community in the United States. We can do that again. How? We're going to seize our destiny. They built 5 libraries as part of their renaissance. Right? So we see this, and it is very exciting because it gives people very deep passion for the thing that's most important to them, which is their home. So we're seizing our destiny, and that is very exciting when I talk to these mayors and city council members and people in the 119 cities that I've studied. Okay, so those are the early stage impacts. Siguiente. Having said all of that, we decided to start a foundation and a think tank to really study this formally, to really look and to see if all of this was true, how it could be measured, and how it could be shared. So that you know what I do, the Intelligent Community Forum has one mission and one mission only. We want to energize, as Dr. Jaime said, communities for the 21st century. We want to give them energy again and get them moving and get them aspiring to the future, to rediscover themselves. So that is really what I do. It's what I've committed myself to, and we're so pleased that we've gotten so much support from around the world to continue our work, because initially this was just a discussion that we had with some very intelligent people, but now it has become a global movement, and I never expected that. If anybody had told me that I'd be standing in Oslo last December as part of the Nobel Peace Prize discussions, I would have said you're crazy 10 years ago. But it just tells you, and it tells young people, how powerful an idea with passion can be. And that applies every place in the world, in every language, and in every culture. Siguiente. ICF's mission and the way we approach our work is very straightforward. We study the economic and social development of the community at the local level. I want to study local communities. I don't care about macro trends. I don't care about national governments. When I go to Washington, they're very nice to me. I meet the senators, and then I look at my watch and I say, when can I get back to a small community? Because I know they're not going to do very much. but we want to study the local communities because that's where all the innovation is taking place. And I think it has a lot to do with the libraries, because I think people are spending a lot of time there trying to, again, innovate, trying to capture knowledge, and trying to move their communities forward. There's a mentoring component to our work. We take the best practices of intelligent communities, of good communities, and we share it and accelerate the development of all. So any community that wants to learn from us, and several Mexican communities have joined the movement, can learn from us. And we are mentored, and we have a discussion. So we are old-fashioned storytellers, right? Storytelling is just emotional transportation. And what we do is we tell stories of communities that work to those that are going to work in the future. And there are many ways we do that, and you can see on our website or in our publications. The next thing we do is to enable a sustained global dialogue among the world's committed thought leaders. Everyone in this room is a thought leader. So we try to have a dialogue with all of the smart people that we can bring together. We bring 250 of them together at New York University every June, and we further the dialogue. But it is a continuous dialogue. It takes place every day in communities around the world. And now it is taking place at the presidential levels in places like Taiwan and in the Office of the Prime Minister, in Canada, and places like that. The next thing, we look for the new railroad. We look for the connecting points. We try to figure out, and we think we know what the new railroad is. As I've said, it's broadband. If you think of the proposition of the old railroad, it was very simple, right? How many people had parents or grandparents who worked on the railroad? Yeah, I did. It was a very simple proposition. If the railroad ran through your town, your community, you could put cargo on it. That cargo would go to the next town or the next village or the next country if it was geographically connected, and you could trade. You could create wealth for yourself. That railroad kind of went away, but what replaced it was the broadband infrastructure, the digital network, the digital future. The difference is the cargo is weightless. It's not coal, it's not wood, it's not all of the raw materials that we know from the past. The new cargo on the new railroad is information, it's ideas, it's innovations that are brought to market, applications, right? And the difference is that it doesn't just go to the next town. It goes to Vietnam, it goes to China, it goes to Brazil. So the new railroad is what we look for and what we try to expand through open access, through more broadband. You know, we really encourage the building of broadband networks around the world. And then finally, as I said, to give a new voice to old truths. Human beings are poetic beings. We live through our stories. And if we tell the truth to each other in a new voice, the truth will be heard. And the simple truth is that we can't exist without our communities being strong. And when our communities are strong, our nations are strong, and our children are strong. So that is how we approach the mission. Siente. So we asked global thought leaders the big questions, and we asked leaders in three primary areas. We ask local political people. This is the mayor of Issy-les-Moulineaux in France, whose city has the largest Microsoft campus outside of Washington, Mr. Santini. We ask private business people. The second gentleman is the founder of Research in Motion, the BlackBerry. He's a part of our movement. We ask people in that area. And then finally, we ask the academic sector, which includes the librarians in this category. And we ask them the really big questions about how to solve the problems of communities. And they say nice things about us, and then we put it up on a PowerPoint, and, you know, people write about us. Okay, siguiente. The other thing that we do is to designate communities as intelligent. And we have a contest or a prize each year where over 400 communities from around the world submit a very, very extensive stream of data to us about themselves. We have an academic jury, we have a research company in India. They evaluate all of the data, and in the autumn of the year, we identify 21 as the SMART 21. And actually, we have had many submissions over the last 3 years from Mexican communities, Last year, we identified a Mexican community as an intelligent community. So Mexico is now engaged in this process. We had the governor of Chiapas attend our conference last year to talk about his Taxistas Vigilantes program and some of the things that are happening, and your country is now part of the movement. We then, and this is very good for us because it's kind of like a beauty contest. I mean, we don't ask the mayors to wear bikinis because that would be awful to look at in many cases. But we give them prizes. We award them this designation, and it gets a lot of attention in the media. All the international media report on it, the television, the internet, and so forth. So it's very good for the communities and for our ideas. In January, we go to Hawaii, and we name 7 of them the 7 most intelligent from that group. There's another competition. They are then invited to New York, where in June we name one of them the most intelligent community of the year. And as you can see in blue there, these are the 7 intelligent communities of 2013. Each of them has a very strong library, as you know. Tallinn, Estonia is doing some remarkable things with their library. Oulu, Finland, of course, the home of Nokia, has a very strong library. Columbus, Ohio is the home of OCLC. So it's not an accident that these communities continue to rise in our awards program. They all have very strong libraries that they're collaborating with.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Siguiente. Okay, finally, why do we need an intelligent communities movement? Okay, because a lot of people still ask us, well, do we really need to do this? Is information in the digital future really depending on how our communities evolve? Our answer is, of course, decidedly yes. I think the why part is easy. Siguiente. The why part is easy. I mean, you just look at this map of Korea, as I said, and you get a sense of what's at stake, what's at risk. Siguiente. But yes, I think it's important for 3 reasons. One, recognition. This is the city of Eindhoven, Holland, which has an open innovation platform where 23 communities in their region, including their libraries, collaborate. They are now producing 25% of the gross domestic product of Holland. They compete with the Chinese in areas like auto design, manufacturing. So they've completely reinvented themselves from a near collapse in the 1980s and 90s. So yes, we need an intelligent community movement for recognition. We also want to encourage people to stay home and grow their own. I'm sorry. So we tell communities, stop trying to draw businesses from your neighbors. You know, stop competing with others. Start to compete with yourself. Do it at home. You can grow your ideas at home. The library is a perfect garden for that. Siguiente. And then rethink the paradigm. We think, you know, I'm not a very tall person, as you can tell. We think small is beautiful. Small communities can compete with the big communities now because of what digital technologies do to level the playing field. Remember what I'm saying to you, that you can participate in a global economy, and the only raw material you need is the human software, but you need to activate it. So that's why we think that this is important. I'm going to say siguiente all the way through here because we're running out of time. But here's one big challenge if you're from a small town. Siguiente. This is Mexico City. It's crowded, right? And by 2050, we're going to have more people living in cities than we have small places. The ICF, we have committed ourselves to reversing that trend, because we just think it's unsustainable, and we think that the rest of the world can be balanced if the right lung and the left lung, the big and the small, you know, are working in harmony. So that's really where we are. We can talk about this in great detail. I encourage you to continue to work with IFLA and also to pay attention to our movement. I have 5 challenges for libraries: to be involved with building the new railroad, to encourage the development of knowledge workers, because knowledge workers are the workers that will move to the middle class, to stimulate innovation, to be hubs of innovation, and they've started down that path, and to incubate local governments into thinking differently. The fourth challenge is digital inclusion, and again, libraries are very good at this. It's a moral mandate. I don't care if you're a Catholic or a Buddhist or a Muslim. We need to bring the least among us into this discussion. They are part of the community, and they have consequence. So give them digital literacy. And then the fifth challenge is to tell your story. Let the library be the place where you light the campfire and you tell the story about your history, your place, and what's happening in the rest of the world. And in parts of the world where there are intelligent communities, they have bookmarks. The librarians and the mayors come in and tell stories about the year they were named by us, the Intelligent Community of the Year. And the kids believe now that they're part of an intelligent community. And they think differently and they act differently. So at the end of the day, I'm going to speak Italian to you now. At the end of the day, we are recovering something. Dr. Campos talked about a circle that needs to be completed. There is one that is being completed now with new voices for old truths. My grandfather was an Italian immigrant from southern Italy. He moved to New York, raised 11 children, worked on the railroad, did very, very well in his community. Had to leave Italy, unfortunately, because I'd like to go back to Italy. But at the end of the day, he would come home, he'd have his grandchildren around him, his 11 children, all his friends, and he'd come and he'd pour himself a glass of wine, of course, and he'd look up and he'd say, "Non ci posto migliore pia della mia casa." There's no place like home. That's the mandate, that's the aspiration for every child in your community who comes into that library to walk out of there to say, there's no place like home. Gracias.
Agradecemos muchísimo la participación y las conferencias que nos dictaron. Yo estoy seguro que por la calidad humana que caracteriza a nuestros distinguidos colegas y ahora conferencistas, ustedes podrán continuar con ellos este diálogo, que así lo entiendo, es un punto de inicio y seguiremos trabajando con ellos en diferentes ámbitos y por supuesto nos dará mucho gusto asistir a Singapur con INGRID y visitar la sede de trabajo en Nueva York. Siempre es hermoso conocer otras comunidades. Muchísimas gracias a ustedes. Tenemos escasos 10 minutos para continuar con nuestro trabajo. Si gustan tomar un café y nos dan tiempo de hacer el cambio de mesa.